All right. Welcome back, everybody. This is the virtual residency workshop, Tuesday, June 28th, 2022. This is the mid-morning session. And our session leader is Dirk Colbry. And this is how to do an intake interview, including intake interview demonstrations. So Dirk, I'm going to turn the show over to you, and I'm cleverly already recording.
Now, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
And you can see my screen. All right. So today we're going to talk a little bit about intake interviews, which is comes from, I'm going to be sharing some stuff from the Cyber Ambassador's First Contact module, which I'll explain in a second. And today is a little different. We're going to do some live demos. Well, not live, actually. We recorded some demos, and we're going to try out this new format. I'm really excited about this form of teaching, so I'm hoping I can get some feedback from you, see how it goes. I will be your facilitator today, but I also want to acknowledge Justin Booth, who will be in the videos with me. And he is here today, or at least said he would be here. And we'll get started. So the first thing I want to do is acknowledge the National Science Foundation for funding the Cyber Ambassador program. They are paying for the development of this curriculum that we've built. To give you a idea of what the Cyber Ambassador is, it's a National Science Foundation grant. It is intended originally to teach cyber infrastructure professionals, research facilitators, the people here basically, professional skills training. And I came up with this idea before I even knew about the virtual residency, and I got the grant about the time I started working with Henry. So we've been working closely together since the start of the grant to make sure that we're targeting the right audience. But we've extended the curriculum as well into other STEM fields, basically anybody with a technology expertise who needs to work in teams. These are the types of curricula that we provide. We also provide a train the trainer option. So this all came out because I'm a campus champion. I've been one since about 2009. And I also taught professional skills training at Tau Beta Pi, which is the Engineering Honor Society. And this is when you, so I thought the Tau Beta Pi professional skills, we teach these to undergraduates. Those skills would really work well with me being a campus champion. And I thought, hey, a cool idea would be to bring those two things together. And I wrote a grant on this and it got funded. The National Science Foundation thought it was a good idea. And then I partnered with a bunch of groups, and this is an older list, there's actually more, to try to get people trained across the ecosystem of what it means to be a cyber infrastructure professional, and to get people using more of these professional skills. Probably the biggest collaborator here is with Henry and the virtual residency. So the curriculum consists of 9 modules. These are the 9 modules. And this week, we're going to cover about 4 of them, parts of 4 of them. Today, I'm going to specifically focus on the intake interview part of First Contact, but you will be hearing me later in the week as well. If you're at all interested, I am teaching the entire curriculum this semester, this summer, virtually. I know some of you have actually been there already. It's really, if you really love sitting in these virtual Zoom meetings, you can do 3 more communications, teamwork, and leadership that I'm hosting on these days. But the reason I'm trying to get as many people as I can to take these workshops is that if you take all of them, you don't have to take them all, but if you take most of them and are familiar with our curricula, we are doing a Train the Trainers event here in person at Michigan State University. This is fully paid for by the National Science Foundation. We'll pay for your flight to get here, we'll pay for your hotel, and we'll pay for your food while you're here. It's a way to learn how to facilitate these types of workshops. And the idea with Cyber Ambassador is we created a curriculum that was easily used by other people. And so the whole point of this Train the Trainers workshop is for you to learn the curriculum and then take it to your own audience, maybe your own conferences, your own people at your own university or whatever it might be, your communities that you want to include. And we're doing hopefully 3 of these workshops. The first one will be in July. We've sort of picked the people that are coming in July, but we have 2 in August. And I really encourage you to sign up, and it's free. All right, enough of shilling for me. Let's get back to what we're doing today. I do want to emphasize that the curriculum we've developed has been scientifically, as best we can, tested. We are basing it off best practices in how to teach professional skills. For example, most of the science says that doing lecturing is not the way to do it, even though I'll be lecturing a lot today. So we also want to do practice and do small group practice, because learning how to communicate effectively is about communicating and practicing that. So today we'll be showing you a few demos, but tomorrow you're actually going to get an opportunity to meet with real people doing real intake, real researchers doing real intake interviews in small groups. And the idea is to take what you learn and actually practice it in a safe environment where you're, if you make a mistake, it's not a big deal. So we're going to be doing that this week. I already showed you that slide. Let's keep going. All right. So on my agenda for this session is I'm going to give you a quick introduction about what is a good intake interview. And we'll talk about some tools you can use during an intake interview and what makes an intake interview interesting and important to our jobs. Then we're going to go through some canned examples. Like I said, we made some videos, and we're going to have you watch those videos and give us feedback and discuss what was good about the videos and bad, so that you can sort of practice a little bit here, and then so that you can get ready for tomorrow. So that's basically the agenda for today. Anybody have any questions? Feel free to throw them into the chat window. And I don't see any right now, although a lot of positive feedback, which, I appreciate. What's an intake interview? Great segue. So what's an intake interview? It's the first meeting you have when you're talking to a new researcher. So you're bringing them into your area of expertise. Now, I usually talk about high performance computing, but it might be some other area of expertise. You're onboarding a new researcher, and you need to learn about them. You need to know the assumption with an intake interview. This is first contact. You've never met them before. Maybe you have, but you don't know them. You don't know their problems. They don't know you, and they don't know what resources you necessarily have. So the whole point of an intake interview is to answer who you are, who they are, what are their problems, and what are your resources. Try to bring all of that together in one interview as best you can. So here's just an example. You're sitting down in your office, and it says, someone says, "Hi, my name is Lauren. I would like to use the HPC for my academic work. How do I get started?" That is the perfect question that someone might ask you. You are now in an intake interview situation, right? You have to then tell them about how to get started, what problems they have, that kind of thing. So just as a way to get everybody included a little bit, I want you to use your chat window. I'm going to ask you a question. And if you've been at any of my online lectures, you've seen me use this chatter before. The idea is I want you to answer the question, but do not hit enter. So I'll ask you a question. You're going to type it out in your chat window, but don't hit enter. And then I'm going to say 3, 2, 1, chat. And then I want everybody to hit enter at the same time. And what will happen is we'll get a bunch of answers, like a waterfall, in the chat window. And I like doing this because it engages everybody. But if you're not included, it's not obvious that you're not included. You also don't have to be the first one to hit enter. It's just a nice way to get some responses. Now I'll read a few of them. So let's just try it. Let's just try this out. So why are intake interviews important? Now, I want you to think about the answer to that question, whatever the answer might be. Type it into your chat window right now. Do not hit enter. And then I'll give you a few seconds. And then I'll say 3, 2, 1, chat. Everybody hit enter. Okay, so there they go. See, there's our little waterfall. Identify needs, provide target advice and support. Your chance to understand the research. First impressions, exclamation point. Make sure you're answering the right question so that I know what the researcher does. Yeah, these are all great answers to that question, and they're all correct. All right, so I hope everyone gets an idea of what a chatter is, and we will be using these throughout just to engage you a little bit. So let's talk a little about my definition of an effective intake interview. So an intake interview is getting to know the person and getting to know their problems and them getting to know your researches. But to be effective, I think it needs to be a little bit more. So I think you need to identify the problems and start to come up with a plan for a solution. I think a good intake interview, an effective one, does that. It identifies whatever problems there are, and then a plan. You don't have to come up with a solution, but a plan to come up with a solution or find a solution. And then key second piece of a good intake interview is to build a relationship. And this is extremely important. When you're onboarding someone to your group, yes, you want to solve their problem, and that is important, but you also want to build a relationship. And that is about getting to know them getting to know you, so that they feel comfortable asking more questions in the future. And that's really what I'm gonna focus a lot on that today. All right. So here's just a bulleted list I came up with. Good intake interviews ask about the research. So a lot of times you're in an intake interview and you jump right into the problem that they're having. You know, I don't have enough memory on my computer, and you focus in on the details of that problem. But I think it's always good to step back and ask a researcher about their research, because researchers love their research. They love talking about it. So be interested in their research, learn about what problems they're trying to solve, why they're trying to solve it. It is good for building that relationship, but it also might be good for helping you solve the problem, to know a bigger context of where the problems are coming from. When at all possible, avoid rushing during an intake interview. You want to listen to what people are saying and do a lot of active listening, which we'll talk about in a second. You don't want to just rush through it. Now, tomorrow's the exception. We will be having a time limit tomorrow. And so we want you to rush a little bit tomorrow, but generally it's not good to rush. You're trying to build a relationship. You're trying to learn about each other. And that's, takes time. When you've gotten to know each other a little bit, try to find the fundamental problems being solved. And then your job as in this case, the computing expert, is to try to define the problem in terms of computing. So the researcher will often define the problem in terms of their research and what their research needs are. You need to help them with that translation. You, in theory, are the computer expert or the expert in research facilitating. So you need to describe the problem based on your expertise, so that and come up with an agreement on what that problem is. Always ask how they think the problem should be solved. Now, you are the expert, so you know better, but sometimes researchers have solutions in their head and they're afraid to ask because they don't want to, they're afraid to say what they think the solution is, because they're not the expert. And it's almost always good to ask them, what do you think a good solution is? And try to get them to share that with you, because oftentimes once you hear their solution, it makes you finding a solution much easier, because they have a clear perspective on the problem and you're just getting to know it. It's also important to assess their ability. Are they new to computers? Are they new to programming, or have they been doing this for 20 years? And that's an important, so you can gauge your feedback on, and the technology or the technical terms you can use and that kind of thing, so that you can help them the most, and avoid any, or actually identify, you're trying to avoid assumptions, but identify any assumptions you might be making and any assumptions they might be making, and really spend some time to try to look at those assumptions. And I'll give you some tools for doing all that. So that's what a good intake interview is all these things. And it's not a taxonomy. These are just the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bullets I came up with when I was thinking about what a good intake interview is. So given that, think about a question that you might ask in an intake interview. It can be early on, it can be later on. What are some good questions to have in your back pocket that you might ask during an intake interview? I want you to type a question into the chat. Don't hit enter yet. And think that through. I'll give you a second. I'll stop talking. All right. Hopefully you have a question. And I want you to hit enter in 3, 2, 1, chat. What is your timeline? Great question. How did you hear about my office? How much data are you storing? Great questions. How do you think we can help you? Could you tell me a little bit about research and how technology fits into your workflow? What do you find the most difficult? Very good. Tell me about your workflows. Where are you in the research process? What is your background? What OS are you working on, and have you used Linux? That's a good clarifying question. What entices you to come to UA? That's a specific question, but I think we can all translate it to our university. What data are you working with? Tell me about your research. What are your deadlines and deliverables? These are all great questions. What are you trying to accomplish? What is your biggest problem? What experience level of the people in your lab? You all have the right idea. That's what we're trying to go with when we ask it, these types of questions in an intake interview. This is a quote that Henry likes to use. I actually have an attribute. Oops, I thought I put it in there. But explain it to Lee like I-12, right? This is really useful when you're trying to get your head around some big questions. You might be the technology expert, but the researcher is the research expert. So we can't assume we understand it, and they might be talking to us in technical terms. And so you can say, explain it to me like I'm 12. A 12-year-old is more than capable of understanding complex things, but there's a lot of assumptions we don't make when we're talking to a 12-year-old. So it's a good target age to think about. And we don't want to talk down to people. You don't have to talk down to a 12-year-old. It's just the right frame of mind to have. We're not talking down. We just need to be on the same level, and they're going to be expertise in their things, and you're going to be an expertise in your things, and you got to find some sort of common ground. So that's a good advice I like to share. So some tools to think about this. I want you to think about active listening. Active listening is the process of paying close attention both to the words that the speaker is using and their body language. Okay. Oops.
All right.
Oh, that's not a question to me. We'll keep going. So it is often good to reflect back to the speaker what you heard. I like to use I statements, like what I understood was, right? And so that way they can hear what you said and correct you if you're wrong. Don't use you statements if you can avoid it. You said, because you're always listening with a filter. And so you're just trying to say what you heard, not what they said. I hope that makes sense. It's a little less argumentative. Anytime strong emotions can derail a conversation. So in an intake interview, honestly, most of them I've been in, they've been light, but sometimes you get that researcher or that grad student coming in who's just distraught because they can't get their research done, or they're working towards a deadline, and there's a lot of emotion. It's always important to acknowledge that emotion and instead of ignoring that emotion. So that sounds really frustrating is a good response. Don't ever say anything like calm down. You're blowing this completely out of proportion. You want to gain a relationship and trust. If there's a strong emotion, address the emotions first. Acknowledge that they're okay to have the feelings, because their feelings are always okay. And then try to derail and get them into a calm place before you worry about solving the problem. Because if the emotions are in the way, the problem-solving method won't really work. The other tool, so in addition to active listening, I want to talk about reducing jargon. We talked about this a lot in the last two sessions, so I don't have to go, or yesterday we talked a lot about this, so I don't have to go into detail, but the idea is pretty simple. Think before you speak, right? What is, get to know what the disciplinary background of the listener is, what the cultural language background of the listener is, and whether there is expertise level is, right? All of these things will cause jargon into the conversation. Now, I want to be clear. Remember, we had these long conversations yesterday about metal. What is metal, and what is a fluid, and all these types of things. Those are scientific jargon, but jargon is, sorry, I'm just got to slow my brain down a little bit. Jargon is extremely useful for communication. We need jargon to make communication effective. Anytime there's a specialized group, we create words or phrases as shortcuts to describe what we're talking about. This is really good. So, my research group uses a lot of shortcuts. We use jargon to help us communicate an idea very quickly. The problem with jargon is if you don't know the definition and what idea that phrase is trying to communicate, it just adds confusion to the conversation. So it's really important to be aware of the types of jargon you're using and how that's influencing your communication. And then once you know what jargon you have, you can do one of two things. You can either explain it because it's important, or eliminate it and get rid of it because it's not essential. That's what you do with jargon. And so it's sometimes helpful if you need to use a word to explain it, or ask if they understand, or ask them to give you a definition so that you're on the same page. And we talked about that, so I can skip that a little bit. So I know we did this a little bit yesterday, but I have it in my slides, so let's do it anyways. So what are some examples of jargon we use as research facilitators? So type something in the chat, just a jargon that we use. And I know we did this yesterday, so you can repeat it if you want. And I want you to do this in 3, 2, 1, chat. Node, DTN, GPU, POC, node, core, cluster, GPU, HPC, a lot of acronyms. Gateway, VPN, DTN. This is all great stuff. We use jargon all the time. Again, it is an exceptionally useful shortcut, but it only works if everybody knows what the shortcut means. And so it can help conversation when you know what it means. It can really hurt conversation when you don't know what it means. The third tool, after active listening, reducing jargon, is called paraphrasing. And this tool I use in apps a lot, especially when you're trying to explain, or you're trying to understand someone's research and they're just going off on a tangent, right? A lot of time researchers just use a lot of their own jargon and you're trying to understand it. Often you don't have to be an expert in their research to understand or help them. You just have to understand enough about the problems and how it relates to the computing. And one of the ways you can kind of come to common ground is this idea of paraphrasing. So you listen, and then in your own words, state the parts of the situation that you understood, right? In your own words, what did you understand? And then that gives the researcher a little bit of moment, says, yes, you understood what I need, or no, you don't understand my need. It allows for understanding. It allows you to make sure you're understand enough to keep moving forward with the problem solving. This is not that you don't use paraphrasing as parroting. You don't want to be a mirror. You don't want to just say exactly the same words they said, because that doesn't mean you understood those words. And if you say exactly the same words they said, they're going to say, yes, that's what I meant. And if you didn't understand those words, you're still not going to understand them. That's why you have to use this as a lens. Instead of a mirror, you want to use this as a lens and repeat back their sentiment of their words, not the words themselves. And then this fourth tool I want you to think about, and I've used this phrase already, and I think Dylan used it yesterday too, is asking clarifying questions. This is a really good, when you're trying to solve a problem, sometimes you just need questions that put you in the right mindset. And they might not seem directly related to the problem being solved, but they help you understand where the user is coming from and what they're doing. So some examples are, what programming language does your software use? That's a good clarifying question. If they don't know the answer, that tells you something. If they have a very specific answer, that tells you something as well. Or maybe you're not interested in programming, so that's not a good question for you to ask. Do you already have an account on our system? Great question. It puts you at a level. Do they have an account? Do they not? Have they used it or not? And have you ever used this approach before? These are all what we call clarifying questions. They're very specific to the question. They might be yes or no questions, but the idea here is to try to get a little bit more detail about the problem so that you can help them solve it. And I guess a key point of this is it might not seem directly related. It might be a little bit tangential, but it helps gauge where everybody is. What is another clarifying question you could ask during an interview? So come up with a clarifying question, and I want you all to type it into the chat. Oh, I got a question before, while you're typing this in. Hey, Dirk, how do you walk the line of offending folks when you're asking clarification? Sometimes feel like you're either not listening or insulting them. So that is important. You do not want to offend people. Honestly, you can even caveat the clarifying question. I'm just understanding where you're coming from. Do not assume people are not smart. Most of the researchers we use are very smart, very good at what they do. They wouldn't be researchers if they're not. And so the reason we want to think about, we're trying to help them is we might be the computing experts. Heck, they might be better at computing than we are, but we are at least the experts to our system and know the secret sauce to using our system. They're the experts in their research. And so we're just trying to bridge that gap. Clarifying questions shouldn't be offensive. I mean, I don't know how I do it. I always ask them, and I don't think people come off as offending. But if you think someone is offended or acts offended or their body language seems offended, you should be addressing that first. All right. So let's actually, people have already started, but I'll do the chatter. 3, 2, 1, chat. So let's see what all questions you had. Wow, so many of you. How much data are we talking about? Can you explain your data flow? Help me understand. Do you understand that you plan to double your compute needs this year? Do I understand that you need to double your compute needs? Who's your audience for this research? That's a good one. Have you ever worked on a shared cluster before? Yes, we are taking PhDs. What is the average length of the time a single job takes to complete? Have you ever submitted a job? Who else? And I think Mary had a good thing. Ask your question with curiosity. You're not trying to judge them. You're just trying to understand their problem. And you can say that, look, I'm just trying to understand your problem so I can best help you solve your problem. That's good questions. Oh, and there was a +1 for Mary too. So good job. Excellent. All right, let's keep going. The other quote that I like, that I attribute to Henry, but he attributes to Dan is, you can say no without saying no. It's better to say, instead of saying no because, say yes if. And you can almost always do that. Yes, if there's you had $1 billion, we could probably do that. That's a little flippant. You don't want to be flippant, but the reason is we don't want to say no if we can say yes if is we can help you, but there's some caveats to that. And it's just a more opening. It builds that relationship better. If you just say no, we don't do that, that cuts off the conversation. It does not build the relationship. It might be true. You might, our HPC site does not make websites. And we get a lot of people say, hey, could you help us build a website to do X, Y, or Z? And the answer is no, not no, because we don't build website. It's yes, I can help direct you to the right place on campus that will do that. Right. And then that's how you act as a facilitator. And so that's what I just said. If to be an effective at solving future problems, you wanted to maintain this relationship in a way. And so we call this a soft handoff, right? If you can't answer the question, or if it's not your job, try to get to know the other people at the university, or maybe even outside the university, who can help. And so then you can say, you know what? That's not what our resources are for, but I can put you in touch with the people that are, and then do that handoff and follow up on that handoff. Frankly, sometimes I've actually just Googled right there with the person. I said, you know what? That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, but let me help you find the answer. And that's you usually call it a warm call. Yeah, I call it soft. Gentle handoff, right? Gentle. And, for that reason, we want to build these relationships within your universities. Honestly, sometimes one of the best resources you could use is the Campus Champion email list. I have had random questions from researchers like, I have no idea the answer for that question. I put a little note on the Campus Champion email list, and less than 5 minutes later, I have like 20 answers. It's an amazing email list. And so, so those are the things. Your job as a research facilitator is to try to avoid saying no and to provide soft handoffs. You don't want to necessarily pass the buck, but not everything's your job. But instead of just saying no, go someplace else, try to help them through that process. Not because it will help them solve this problem, but if they will more likely come back to you in the future, and we're trying to build that relationship. So every time you close an intake interview, figure out what action items you have. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? What do you want the researcher to do? Saying, you know what? Our next step is I want you to go out and fill out the form to get an account. That has to be your next step. And then I want you to attend one of our workshops, whatever it might be. Or it's like, you know what? I'm going to follow up and see if I can find someone to help you debug this problem, who's a system administrator who has the right access or whatever it might be. And then if you can include, actually almost always try to include follow-up times. You say something like, if you've not heard from me in a week, get back to me. Never take longer than the week. You don't ever want them to come back to you, but by saying that, you put yourself on the hook. You make sure that that's going to be followed up on. Another good one is say, you know what, I'll check back with you in a week. You put it on your to-do list or whatever, and then in a week you follow up. Having a follow-up means that that doesn't fall off the face of the earth. It also shows to the researcher that you care about the relationship. So those are the two things I'd recommend you do after each intake interview. Now, tomorrow you're going to be doing intake interviews with people that are not at your university, that have their own research, but that does not mean that you might not find something that you can do to help them. And I would encourage you to find things you can do to help them and then follow up with them. That it would be a great outcome, in my opinion, unless Henry says not to contact these people. But I think if, depending on how those conversations go, treat it like a real intake interview. All right. Now we're going to try this new thing that I haven't done before, and it's a little bit of an experiment. We're going to do some fake examples. Now, unfortunately, you're going to continue to hear me talking because I'm in the videos, but I want everyone to make sure you have, oh, and Henry mentioned this, and I'll say it right here. If you have a follow-up with someone from a meeting, the best thing you do, and this is really the right answer, is to tell Henry or email Henry that follow-up, and he will make sure that that gets to the right researcher. That makes a lot of sense to me. And they'll let Henry, because he has to maintain that relationship also, and he doesn't want other people, not that you have bad intentions, but other people going into his relationship is bad. And so we want to respect Henry relationships with the people that he's brought in. And by doing that, we're going to make sure Henry gets those emails and not contact those people directly. Exactly what Henry said in the chat. Okay, excellent. We don't want to always share the information. So what we're going to do is we're going to live chat the videos. They're a little bit long. They don't have a script. These are fake in the sense that we're pretending to be research facilitators and we're pretending to be researchers in these videos. And so even though the faces will be saying the same, we're acting. So we have different names and we're acting out in different ways. And sometimes I'm the facilitator and sometimes Justin's the facilitator. And so we switch roles a few times. Try not to let that distract you. Each video is slightly different. And what I want you to do is while we're chatting with each other, I want you to type your thoughts into the chat window. Just do a stream of thought and hit enter. Just keep going. What do you like? What if we say something you like? Write that down. What don't you like? What questions would you have asked that seem to be obvious? Those types of things. I want you to just have a streaming level of conversation. And then both Justin and I are here as well. And we can have this conversation back and forth while the video is actually playing. And so that way, I'm hoping to get a little bit of a discussion and the videos won't be too boring. You can read and listen at the same time. If we can't, if this doesn't work, please tell me. This is the first time we're trying this. All right. Any questions in the chat before we get started? All right. First, a disclaimer: this story, names, characters, and incidents portrayed in this production are fictitious. In relationship to real world people, events are entirely coincidental. So I won't say I base these videos on real world situations because that would harm people that are probably true.
And I'm not a paid actor.
Yes, and neither Justin or I are paid actor. And this is oh wait, can you guys see the video?
Yeah, I can see the screen. It's but
you see Justin on the left and me on the right, right?
Correct.
Okay, so Justin's on the left and then that's me on the right, but we're not Justin and Dirk anymore, we're someone else. So I'm gonna hit play on this video and I want you to just put your comments in the chat. Hello, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to meet with me. I really appreciate, I really need your help. My name is Dana and you are?
My name is Jesse. Hi, Dana. Thanks for reaching out.
Nice to meet you, Jesse.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm very frustrated. I have a lot of data I need to process using the Sanborn Strata method, which is better than the more common FCFD method. However, my transient error is much larger than my latent error. I think I can reduce the transient error, but I need to increase the Tau-Home threshold. But then the software doesn't run on my computer. So I need to make it run on the supercomputer. I was told you were the person to talk to.
Oh, Dana, I'm sorry to hear that. It sounds like you've got cascading problems here. What is your timeline right now? Are you like, do you need, how are things working out for you right now?
I mean, really, we've got a paper we're writing. We can't get the results that we need. I would like to submit that paper in a couple months. I have a grad student who's starting this process, but we just can't even get the software to run because the computers are too slow.
Well, we need to get you back on track. My job here in research cyber infrastructure is to, try to solve or figure out where your problems reside and see if we can't bring some clarity to work through these problems. You threw a lot at me in that call. What specifically can you describe the systems that are running these calculations right now for me again?
Oh, it's my this computer I'm talking to you on. It's my Windows machine.
Okay, so you're working off of a laptop. Are you connecting to a larger compute node, or are you just?
No, this is a desktop. It was pretty powerful. I bought it a few years ago, but I had my graduate student pick it out for us. It has lots of memory and lots of cores. It's about 4 years old.
Okay.
It was top of the line then. It cost us something like $10,000. I can't give you the specs, my grad student could, but it was an expensive computer. And it so far has been doing amazing work. It's just when we increase that tell home threshold, it just grinds everything to a halt and nothing works anymore. And the math doesn't get going. And we just need the supercomputer. All I really need is to just take our software and run it on the supercomputer. Because I just needed to go faster.
So who's responsible for writing that code? Is that the work that you're doing, or is that your grad student?
Well, I mean, these are all standard methods. So my grad student typed them up in MATLAB.
Okay.
And then we run MATLAB on this computer. Like I said, they're pretty standard methods. We're not doing anything crazy outside of my field. But it's well known that as you crank up that tell home threshold, computation just grinds to a halt. And so
I see.
We have been leading the pack in our research area, mostly because of this desktop that has been powerful enough. But then I was told that the supercomputer's on campus, and so we just need to use the bigger computer.
You need to move to the bigger computer. Now, can you think back to what the last time you were able to successfully run this code?
Oh, I mean, I can run it now at a lower tell home threshold.
I see.
But once you creep it up past 0.7 or 0.8, you're done.
I see. And are you using your parallel computing, or have you explored any of that work?
Well, I do know this computer has, I think, 16 or 20 cores. I can't remember what they bought. So that they told me that makes it run faster.
I see. Okay. Well, it sounds like what we need to do then, if you're noticing that threshold change is what's locking out your code. So we need to get you in front of a resource to sit down and review that code to see if there's a way that we can get it to better utilize the processors that you have.
Okay.
And
why not use the supercomputer?
I think that what we're going to find is the supercomputer is going to provide you the same results.
But why wouldn't the bigger computer run faster?
Well, we don't know that for sure yet. And I think that it's, if you're telling me that the threshold, as you edit that threshold, I think what we may have to, sounds like you've got quite a few resources on that machine already. And my sense is we might be able to get a resource in there to help you optimize that code. And then we can see about how to transfer that to the supercomputer would be one option. I think what we want to do is look at your code locally and see if we can isolate a problem there first before we introduce an entire new environment. Then we will lose understanding of control over additional variables if we just move right to the supercomputer. I think the best approach would be to work with the resources you have and the team that you have currently.
So I have 20 cores on my computer, and I was told that the supercomputer has 10,000 cores. It seems to me that I should be able to do a problem 1,000 times bigger on the bigger computer.
Yeah, that makes complete sense to me, Dana. I think that we should, I just don't know the answer to that. And I think we need to start first with your resources and with your students and take a look at that code, and let's get a person in to give you another set of eyes on that code and see if indeed we can't add just a little more resources or add up that calculation a little bit more and see if we can get that running again on your machine, and then reach out to the supercomputer to see if indeed we can take that code and move it to the supercomputer. But first, let's look at your existing resources before we jump.
Oh, you're the expert. Thank you for helping me with this.
Not a problem. I enjoy this. Thank you very much for reaching out, and let's get another call scheduled.
Perfect.
Great.
Hello, thank you for taking time.
Sorry.
You were tough on that guy, Dirk.
Yeah. Poor guy. Actually, that was super fun for me. I saw all the chats. I'm hoping everyone's following along. That was super fun because we worked really hard on the video, and seeing all the responses were really great. So if you weren't following along, read through. I really got excited for some of these. People noticed that we identified that, noticed that there was a ton of jargon at the beginning. That could have thrown you. You could have spent the entire time just worrying about the jargon, but you saw what Jesse did is ignore it. I'm not ignore it, but basically said, I don't have to be an expert in all of that research jargon. I just need to nail down what it is that you need. Now, that doesn't mean you don't need to be an expert. It just means maybe not right now during the intake interview. Do I need to ask him what exactly a Talholm threshold is, or what exactly, what the Sandborn strata method is? Those are very obviously very specialized to their area of research, and it may not be important. Might be, but it might not be. And so you're trying to just go through that part.
Well, and Dirk, it also shows you how important those transition terms that you were pointing out earlier are in those conversations that try to bridge from one thing to the next. Having those in your toolkit is super helpful.
Yeah. So now I'm just going to ask some questions. Was this scenario realistic? I think I saw some of your answers. Go ahead and just throw it in the chat if you're answering the some said it's very realistic. Yeah, so I like this comment. I'm going to read this one. Oops, and I messed that up. Sorry. Oh, you guys are talking too quick. I can't scroll. Great. Yeah, okay, I missed the term. You guys are talking too fast. This is good stuff. So good stuff. I really enjoyed your comments. I think we answered most of these questions. Did Jesse sufficiently understand the question? Well, clearly no one's going to understand what this Sandborn strata method is, mostly because I made up that term. But and it was fun to make up things like Talholm threshold. It all sounded real to me, but it's all made up. So realistic, usually the timeline is shorter than a couple months. Absolutely. But every situation is slightly different, right? And so we're just having you practice. There's always trying to get what the user wants or the researcher wants is important. Whether you're able to actually provide what they want is a different issue, but actually understanding the problem and understanding what they need to solve their problem, I think is the important part. Any other thoughts that anybody wants to share? +1 for Brett. You guys are so fast, I can't read. The hero they want, not the hero they need. What did Brad say? it can be hard for researchers that they hear that our cores may be slower than their desktops. And it can be hard. Do you say that right off? No, we have no idea if the code runs in parallel. We have no idea. There's a lot of things we don't know. I noticed a lot of people said that we could get the grad student in. I think that's a great solution, assuming the grad student's still here, right? Grad students turn over very quickly. And so you can't always count on the grad student being here that wrote the software, at least in my experience. Yeah, I agree. There was some frustration. I tried to create that frustration when I acted it out, that the researcher wanted to run on the HPC, but that might not be the solution that they're given. I think a workflow review is the right solution that that Jesse came up with. And that's not the only solution, though. It depends a little bit on the resources you have and the time that each of you, the time that you have and the resources that your facility has. All of that will change the answer, but this was a perfectly reasonable next step. All right, let's try another one. Same disclaimer. I think this time we're switching roles. And so we're going to listen to this one. Everybody ready? I'll mute my mic. Hey, my name's Jasper. I work here at our local high performance computing center. How can I help you today?
Hey, Jasper. My name is Jamie, and I am in need of some desperate help right now. I am a faculty member in the remote sensing department, and I am working through a whole bunch of imagery. And what I'm trying to do is some experimental analysis, and we've got a whole bunch of imagery. We're talking about 10,000 images inputs right now that we need to do processing on. And we had this working, and we had our algorithm set up, and we were processing this data just fine. And now we've upped the ante, and we have more inputs now that we need to put in there. And things are just slowing way down, and I need some help and to figure out how we can keep moving forward. And I'm feeling like the supercomputer might be my answer.
So can you tell me more about your analysis? I mean, how long does it take to currently process your images, and what kind of computer are you running on?
You know, we're running on the state-of-the-art Windows machine. We've added as much RAM as we can to the machine. We've got the video cards. We have cooling systems in there. We're ready to go. The second, we had it's about 10 minutes per image that it has to go through pixel by pixel and to do comparisons and analysis. And we are, we've never used a supercomputer before, but we just know it's got to be the answer to our problem.
So when I hear image data, one thing that it comes to mind is the results of one image dependent on the results of another image? Are they independent results? Does that make sense to you? So does it matter which order I process the images in?
It doesn't. It doesn't matter. We've got a set of algorithms on each that are looking for they're looking at the patterns in each image, and they're off-putting data into the statistics that are valuable metadata for each image.
No, that's good. So if it was like a video where, one frame depended on a previous frame, it gets harder. But with independent analyses, that means we can run them on separate computers at the same time. And we call that parallel processing. So,
okay.
So if you're saying it takes 10 minutes to run a single image, if I do that calculation, which I did on my little Google calculator here, it will 10,000 images will take approximately 65 days to run the way you have it written.
Yeah.
Now, that's where your slowness has come. Now, there's lots of options that we could consider. One is there anything we can do to optimize the code? It sounds like you got a very good desktop computer with a lot of resources, and you're probably not utilizing all those resources effectively. So we could look at the code and try to optimize it. That could be one thing to do. But since it's giving you analyses that you want, the other thing to do is we might be able to port it to the high performance computing center. And
our system, a standard allocation can run on 500 computers. And so now your 10 minutes per image of 10,000 image divided by 500 computers means we could run it in about 3.5 hours.
Oh, that would
So
be fantastic.
what I like about that is that doesn't break your current code, right? If it works on your computer. Now, I don't know if it will port over. You said you're running on Windows.
Yeah.
Our HPC runs on Linux. So we'll have to look in that. There's also a possibility that there's some efficiencies in the code that we could add that might solve all of our problems, and you can continue to use yours. But these are the types of things I want to look at with you.
Okay.
And so, yes, we can do that. Does that seem like a reasonable
But Jasper,
solution?
that sounds expensive. Is this something that you have resources that can help me with this?
So the
I've only
HPC
got a few $1,000s left in my grant.
So that's very wise. So right now, the HPC on our campus is free for all researchers,
Okay.
but up to a limit. There are also national resources that are free through the National Science Foundation called Exceed resources. We can
Okay.
get you on those if we need to. There are lots of free resources. Some of them require, like the Exceed requires you to write a short proposal, that kind of thing. But
Okay.
but they're very large resources, and we might be able to do that. So
Okay. Well, it was my grad student that wrote the code. So that's, that he's off on an internship. That's not, can you guys help me with that code?
well, we don't have coders in our lab, but I would be happy to spend a few minutes looking through it with
Okay.
you, because my expertise is coding. I will not be rewriting it for you, but I should be able to identify if there is some obvious problems with the code or obvious speed ups that we can make.
Okay.
And I will do that for anybody on campus, right? Give me about an hour with you in the room, and we'll look at the code together, and I'll see if I can see anything obvious. If not, we can still run on the HPC. Even if it's non-optimal, we can get it down to 3 hours instead of 65 days.
Yeah, that would be a great start for us. Thank you, Jasper.
Yeah, happy to help you, Jesse. And I hope to see you soon. Let's reschedule a meeting quickly and have you, let's look at your code.
Great. Thank you.
All right, that was the second video. Why is it always giving me trouble?
Hey,
Don't need to hear myself any more than I have to. My voice sounds weird. So, was this scenario realistic? So everyone thought this was realistic. Did Jasper understand the problem? I think you had some good comments in there. I saw that asking if they were using ArcGIS. Very good question. Now, this facilitator did not ask that. Maybe they don't know about ArcGIS, which is absolutely fine. But ArcGIS is, as far as I know, is Windows only. And that might make it hard or not. But we did say at some point in that video that it might be hard to port it. And someone said that that was maybe over realistic. So managing a person's expectations, so saying we're going to be done in 3 hours sounds great. You felt that Jasper overcommitted with the code. And these are all true statements. Did the research facilitator make any critical errors? I don't think so. There's no perfect way to do it, but the idea is to try to show and build that relationship, identify the problem, and then work towards a solution, which I think that was able to do in this video. What else? Anybody else have any other comments? Jasper overcommitted with code. All right, excellent. Let's do, how are we doing time-wise? So I have two more, I have one more really scheduled, but we probably will only do that one. I have a fourth one in case we ran out of time because I didn't know how long things were going to take. So let's do a one last one and see if you can tell any difference with this. Actually, what this is a repeat of the last scenario, but done slightly different. So this is a repeat of the last scenario.
welcome to my office hours. How can I help you today?
Hi, my name is Jamie, and I am a faculty member in the remote sensing department, and I could really use some help. I'm running some compute on some satellite imagery, and it's just not working out for me. My resources are locking up, and I need to talk through a way to move this to the supercomputer.
Okay, can you tell me a little bit more about what kind of calculation you're doing?
Yeah, I've got thousands of satellite imagery. I'm doing comparisons of their pixel values. We're doing some nearest neighbor calculations. We're looking at all of this data, and we're trying to seek out some reflectance values that will help us with some climate change data that we're deriving from this. And we're just getting more and more data, and it's just getting more and more complicated. I have a state-of-the-art machine in my office with some GPUs and some great cores that are helping us get this work calculated. And the more data we add, the more cumbersome it gets.
So why do you think moving the supercomputer is going to help you?
Because it's super, right? It's got more.
It is.
It has, you guys, there's more resources, and it just felt like I needed to throw more resources at this algorithm to make it push through. And we're getting we're getting some great feedback in our analysis approach, and so I'm expecting thousands of more imagery that we'll be able to put into this process. And so our initial white papers on this are getting some good feedback, and we're ready to start to expand this. And the more I expand it locally on our machine, the more trouble I get with the compute time.
Excellent. So all you need to do is fill out our form to get an account. And then you can use standard SCP to upload whatever code and files you need to the computer. And then we'll have you write a Slurm script, and you can submit a job, and you'll be up and running in no time.
My graduate students are in the field for the summer. That's not, so being able just to hand off the, upload code is not going to work for me.
So what do you need? I mean, it's pretty straightforward stuff.
Well, it doesn't sound like it. It sounds like you're asking me to do all the work here. Are you, what's SAP? What's, do you need an account number? Is there a cost associated with this work?
So using our local HPC is free, but you have to use it. It's a supercomputer. It's not, it's not an average person computer.
Okay.
You need to use, you need to get an account. You need to log in. It's all free. We have a wiki, and we have a bunch of videos on how to use the system. Just watch those videos. You'll get on, and you should be, it sounds like your system should be pretty easy. And if you, have problems, you can submit a ticket to our ticketing system.
Okay. So this is a free resource, and, I've been doing a lot of research, and I have a lot of, indirect costs come from my grants that I thought helped pay for these types of resources. And now you're telling me to just get in line and fill out a ticket. Is that what we're doing here?
Yeah. So it's all free. We just provide, you log in. We have a pretty standard interface. And if you're not familiar with it, you could go to one of our tutorials, which are fairly regular. And if not, we have some online tutorial help. I mean, it is a supercomputer. It is not easy, but it's pretty straightforward. If you're running it on your local computer, a savvy programmer should be able to have no problem porting it to the HPC.
Okay. All right. Well, I have some collaborators at other universities that, have some resources. So maybe I'll work with them to look for another solution to this problem.
Oh, that sounds like a great idea.
Okay. Well, thanks for your time, I guess.
All right. You take care.
Bye.
Okay, how did that one go? The acting is just amazing. Absolutely. I had my wrong calling. You always need to provide a concrete solution, even as a small step forward. So I think most of you keyed in, and I was pleased that it wasn't too subtle. I was trying not to be subtle, but this was the same scenario, but with a bad response, right? And honestly, but not an unrealistic response. I hope everyone can see that. Is often when we as research facilitators, we sometimes don't fully engage. We're not active listening with our researcher. We might miss that what we think we're saying is perfectly friendly and nice. I mean, do you think Jasper, the research facilitator, thought that they were being rude? Right? I don't think Jasper thought they were being rude. They were truly, I think, in their heart trying to help the person. They just didn't understand that what they were saying was condescending. What they were saying was not actually helpful, and not really truly listening to the researcher. And that's what we wanted to show out. We want you to be the first Jasper, not the second mustache. We want no mustache Jasper, not with mustache Jasper, right? So we don't want the fake mustache. Yeah, and I realized halfway while we're watching this, I had way too many names that started with J. I don't know why we ended up picking all names with J. I think that was we tried to pick gender neutral names, but I think we ended up picking just a lot of J names. Jasper might have 100 plus other researchers that want him to be their consultant, don't have much time, but he could be a little more helpful for sure. Yeah. So the idea is, yes, everybody's busy. Absolutely. Everybody's busy. You don't want to promise time that you don't have. But an intake interview is your chance to build a relationship. If you can't truly help this person, pass them off to someone who can, right? Be the person that be someone that can be helpful. Doesn't mean you have to do the work. All right. Everyone feel good about that? Ooh, we might have time for the next one. Oh, wait, I did this one already. All right. So did Jasper actually solve this problem? That was a good thing. What was the end solution to this? His solution was they're going to go someplace else, which actually, from Jasper's point of view, might be the ideal solution because they don't want to deal with it. And you say, researchers is going to look for someone else and Jasper is going to get fired. You say that, but I have worked with research facilitators like this before. And their heart might be in the right place, but they don't know how to communicate effectively. And that's what we're trying to teach you this week, is that communication is so important to doing the job successfully. And it's not just about solving the problem, either correctly or incorrectly. It's also about building and maintaining that relationship. And that is one of our most important jobs as research facilitators. If we can build our network, we can be the person that solves problems. We can help them out. They can, Jasper will be promoted to management. I love that. All right. So I want you to think a little bit about tomorrow. Now that we've watched a few videos and we thought this through, what are, and remember, don't hit enter on your say. What strategies do you have for tomorrow's intake interview? So tomorrow you're going to meet a bunch of people that are researchers that may be new to HPC, maybe have been doing it for years. You don't know. It's all going to be, you don't know anything about them really. And your job is to get to know them and build that relationship. So what are some of your strategies? So type something into the chat. And I want you to hit enter in 3, 2, 1, chat. Active listening, paraphrasing, showing genuine interest in their work, having an intake interview template guide at hand for the meeting. Listen. An intake interview template guide. That's a good idea. Maybe I should type that up for some of our research facilitators. Be clear about the agenda. Speak slowly with empathy, clarifying questions with curiosity, no jargon. Think about the root problem, open-ended questions. Your job is to know them first. Actively listen, paraphrase, end with a good wrap-up. Long-term need a conversation dashboard. Do some research. Do some research on the researcher prior to the meeting. I think that's a good one when you can, but a good intake interview, you may or may not be able to, if you have open office hours or you're going to be thrown into a random room tomorrow, you can't always do the research. But honestly, if you're on a Zoom call, sometimes you can, even while you're on a talk, as long as you're engaged, you don't want to look like you're looking something up. This is all great stuff. I really think you guys have hit this well. All right, actually, we have a few minutes, right? We have till 1, right, Henry?
That's right.
So I want to try something. I'm going to do one more video, although, we don't quite have enough time. All right, we're going to skip that video. I don't want to take too long. So I am, just so you know, and then ask questions in the chat, although I just closed the chat window by mistake. So like I said, this is all, I designed this for the virtual residency. We're actually, Henry and I have talked about using maybe the videos to ask questions for the Sifted certificate program, which he mentioned yesterday. And then the other thing is I'm really considering using more of this style of video, especially when you're trying to communicate. It's sometimes helpful to see how other people communicate and reflect on that. When I taught, and I told you about Engineering Futures, which was the National Honor, Tau Pi, the National Honor Society, did these types of classes for many, many years. And they had a whole set of videos they were recording in the 80s, but they were a very effective way to get to know it. And then Brad suggested we play it at 1 1/4 speed. That's an interesting idea. I'm a little worried about, I like that idea because they are slow, right? They're a slow video and it's a little dragging to just sit there and listen to other people talk. So I'm curious what other people would say if you want to give a thoughts on that. We will be, so like I said, we're going to make more of these videos. We're going to maybe integrate them with the sifted testing, maybe. We have to decide if that's going to be effective or not. But as part of the facilitator training, I'm actually going to hope that some people will be making new videos and that we will be curating a list of these to use in future virtual residencies and cyber ambassador workshops so that we can try it all out. So any other questions? Yeah, Ben said that speeding up could make it difficult for non-native English speakers to follow. That was one of my concerns. Wondering if anyone has used an intake survey with researchers before the meeting to gain more information. I like this idea, is to get, ask some standard questions, although it would have to be an optional survey, in my opinion. You don't want to increase barriers to entry, right? You don't want to discourage people to meet with you because they have to fill out some long survey or something. I get so many surveys that it gets ridiculous, but I like the idea of it. What did Mary Elizabeth said something that I missed and I got to scroll back and find it. I can't find it. So we're not going to do that question. Lots of +1s for Mary Elizabeth. Thank you for whatever you said. I usually would have consultations before meetings with a researcher before they submitted a data request. I think that's right. I think what we're describing here is that initial conversation. I think the value of the intake interview is the interviewer adapting to the situation, perhaps with a specific relevant question to follow up. Right. And having some standard questions written down just as a guide could be helpful, especially if you're new to intake interviews. And actually, that might be a fun thing for me to compile and try to put together for this in future classes. But you would not want a script for an intake interview. You definitely don't want a script. You want to have someone who's there, who's engaging with you and paying attention to what you're saying and not just following some script. But you're right. I think a guide could help take that fear away, especially if you're new and you don't know what to ask. It can be helpful to look through some questions. How long are my intake interviews? It really depends. I almost always schedule about an hour. I'm willing to give almost anybody an hour of my time. I know that seems generous, but I feel like I'm trying to build relationships. And so I say, come meet with me for an hour. We'll talk it through. If we don't need the hour, that's fine. If we need more, we'll consider picking it up. That's my personal comfort zone. Everybody will have slightly different. I also do a lot of intake interviews, like during office hours, where people just randomly show up. And then I say, just tell me about your research, and then what problems are you having? And then that ends up being a lot of intake interviews. Brandon has a Google form with researchers focused questions. What do you do? What are your goals? And that's a great way to start, and asking them to even fill out a form ahead of time, I think, is reasonable. Like I said, I probably wouldn't make the answers required. So put a disclaimer at the bottom. The goal of this form is to try to get as much information as we can to properly prepare for our meeting. Can you tell me about these things? We don't do that, but I think that's an interesting idea. I feel like sometimes building the relationship is actually more important than coming up with a plan of action. So when I say a plan of action, I think make a plan to make a plan. You don't have to have the action, but you have to say, what are our next steps? How are we going to move forward with this problem solving? I think that's important to establish next steps in an intake interview, but the next steps might not be very specific. It might be, you know what, we don't know, but now that I know what your problem is, and I know where you're going with it, let's use that as an opportunity to get some more background, and then I'll get back to you and we can go from there. That is absolutely okay. Oh yeah, and Grace had a good question. How often is the interview with a PI versus a grad student or postdoc? I would say most of mine, I don't know why we did all of them with PIs. We should have done graduate students. That is definitely by far the most common. But yeah, I think you're right. Maybe I need to make more videos just to have grad students and postdocs represented, because I think that is important. And by the way, these videos were edited. I know I noticed the hiccups because I edited it, but really, it's not always so focused and fast. It's usually a little slower, but I had to edit it for the purposes of this presentation. How much small talk do you do to build a relationship? Different cultures have different rules about small talk. So, you have to be a little careful of just small talk, but you can sometimes make small talk about the research. And then I think it's okay to add. So tell me about your research. What got you into your research? How did you get started with this area of research? That's sort of small talk, but it's related and it can help the conversation moving forward. Talking about the weather is absolutely okay as well, but people's time is valuable. And so it feels a little out of the scope and it might not be a good use of time. Depends on the culture as well, though. This is all great stuff. I can't read all of it. So if anybody wants to mention anything, we're down to 1 minute. Any one questions you want to say out loud that would, that we really feel like we should address?
Hi. If we have a first contact with the end user and after this conversation, either if it goes well or not, the user disappears, should we chase them?
Should you chase them? What do you, I didn't understand that
I mean,
question.
look for a follow up. Call him or write him and ask him if he still needs help with the issue.
I almost always follow up. I almost always try to follow up whenever I can. Anytime someone asks me a question and I even answer it, let's say I answer it right there in the meeting, I will still often follow up. I put a note in my email. I actually just create a new email and I send it in the future. And I said, hey, actually, I don't tend to send it. I just put it in my inbox and I check that every day or my drafts box. And then, but it's, you'll say something like, hey, we talked a couple of weeks ago. We talked through your problems. I'm just following up to see if that solution we came up with actually solved the problem or if you need more help. I always do that because I'm always thinking about that relationship. I don't know if that's required for everyone and for every exact situation, but I almost always try to follow up. If you broke the relationship, which happens, I've broken relationships before. I've been sworn at, I've been yelled at, sometimes emotions, and I wasn't able to use my tools to repair the relationship. That happens sometimes. I always try my best to keep it professional. I always ignore as much as I can. I try to be empathetic to the fact that they're under a lot of stress and that, if they swore at me or were rude to me, it doesn't mean I have to take getting rude to, but I will always give people a second chance. I might not give them a third chance, but I will give people a second chance and let them know that I understand emotions get high. I was not being helpful as they needed me to be. Can I try again? And I've had to write those emails and I've had successful relationships build up after those. So I would say always follow up if you can, but that's my strategy. I don't know if everybody else feels the same way. All right. I think we're done for time. Henry, do you have anything else to say?
Only a hearty thank you, Dirk, for a fantastic session, both on its own and then also in preparation for tomorrow's live intake interview practicum with real live researchers who have no idea what they've gotten themselves into, but they have volunteered. They're from a variety of institutions. We have, I think, around 20 of them, and we'll be breaking up into groups tomorrow, one group per researcher, and we're going to do intake interviews, and they're going to be very rapid. We jokingly refer to this as speed dating, and we'll be doing 15 to 20 minutes per intake interview and then rotating the researchers among the breakout groups. It's very exciting. It's very fast paced. It's very fun. It's very educational, and the researchers report they get a lot out of it because they get solutions to the issues that they're working on. So we're all looking forward to that session tomorrow. And our next session is coming up in just under an hour and a half. So we're doing components and design of an HPC cluster. That's led by Jerry Perez of University of Texas at Dallas. It's going to be fantastic. You're going to love it. We're going to have a grand old time together. So I'll leave this session live, but do come back in an hour and a half. And we're going to learn all kinds of useful things. This is more on the technology side, very valuable for everyone. So thanks, folks. Stick around, stay logged in, have some lunch, and we'll see you in about an hour and a half.